All right, friends, you know what time it is. It's time for another birth chart reading. This reading will be for Sunday, November 11th, 1990 at 5:59 p.m. in New York, New York. And I do thank this person for volunteering for me to post this chart reading publicly. Just for anyone else out there, definitely know that most of my chart readings are posted privately. So if you do want a reading from me, by no means does it need to be public. The vast majority of my readings are private. I usually don't even ask. It was only because he or she volunteered that I'm posting this publicly. But yeah, if at any point you decide you would like a reading of your own, you can definitely go to my website. It's manic.mercurian.net. You can get information on readings there, and you can purchase your own reading there as well. Just make sure you also email me your birth date, time, and place for a birth chart reading like this. My email is manic.mercurian@gmail.com. Okay, so now to get on with the reading. So with your birth date, time, and location, this means that you have Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Virgo with Gemini rising. At first glance, your chart actually looks a little bit like mine. But okay, so you have Scorpio Sun. I kind of almost chuckled at that, because for some reason, like by far the most common sun sign that asks me for readings is definitely Scorpio. I'm not sure why. I mean, I guess Scorpio is often associated with astrology. What's interesting, though, is that although I've probably done the most readings for Scorpio Sun people, I'm still intimidated to tackle, to analyze that kind of meaning or those kinds of placements. And I guess the reason why is because, it's no secret that Scorpio is misunderstood. It's a complicated sign. I think we can kind of see why, because, when we look at that time of year, I am a tropical astrologer, and despite the name, tropical astrologers actually connect the signs to the seasons. That's what I believe in. So you can connect Scorpio to the middle of fall in the northern hemisphere. So what's happening at that time, here in early to mid-November when you were born, basically the world appears to be dying. It's getting colder. Often there's like the first frost at that time in many latitudes. And the leaves are dropping and decaying, and everything's getting harsher and scarier, I guess you could say. We're launching into fall and getting closer to winter. So being born at that time of year is a little bit kind of backwards. You're starting your life in this very vulnerable state at a time where the world appears to be dying. So if you kind of think about the ramifications of that, it makes sense that Scorpio Sun people, or people with Scorpio placements in general, are so resilient. It's almost like they're on kind of an overdrive, they're in a survival mentality all the time. And I think it kind of makes sense when you think about that time of year. And I think from that, there comes a lot of benefits of Scorpio placements. Like Scorpio placements have so much potential to be so talented in so many different ways. Of course, Scorpio is, I would say, the most emotionally intense sign. So there's a lot of emotion there that can be very difficult, that can be part of why Scorpio is misunderstood. But with that emotion comes intelligence as well. There comes a lot of intuition, psychic abilities, and I think Scorpio has this like underlying insecurity. And again, I would relate it to that time of year, the middle of fall, where, we're not talking about like the middle of summer where you can just relax and like everything's good and you can rest assured that tomorrow and next week are going to be good too. Like in the middle of fall, you have to be, everything is changing. And so I think that's why Scorpio's on high alert, not only emotionally, but intellectually as well. So that's why Scorpio can do it all. They can be very intuitive. They can pick up on vibes and emotions, feelings of others. Who do I trust is a huge theme when shit hits the fan, so to speak. So they have that emotional intelligence, emotional ability, but they also have the intellectual ability as well. I would say outside of the like traditional intellectual signs, Scorpio would be, kind of the next rival for most analytical, most of that type of intelligence as well, if that makes sense. So emotional intelligence, analytical intelligence, Scorpio can often be, musically oriented. They can be great with performing, but they can also be very secretive. They can be great with like science and information. They can really be great at so many different things. So you've got all that going on. That's kind of my Scorpio spiel. And really, that is definitely a very heavy theme for you because you have not only Sun in Scorpio, you've got really a whole stellium, Pluto, Sun, Lilith, and Venus. So we'll talk more about some of those placements as we get deeper into the reading. It is particularly interesting that you have Pluto conjunct the Sun. And in modern astrology, Pluto rules over Scorpio. So having Sun in Scorpio with Pluto conjunct the Sun as well, that just adds to like this really heavy emotion that comes with these types of energies. And pretty much everything I just said like is just amplified with that Pluto conjunction. And even Lilith is actually tightly conjunct the Sun. Lilith is a wild, untamable feminine energy that's within all of us. It can be very sexual. It can be very dark. It's definitely not evil, though. In a way, I guess there are some similarities between Lilith and Pluto. Both are dark. Both are not evil necessarily. I would say they're a little bit different in the sense that Pluto has to do more with loss and times of like restriction, whereas Lilith is just kind of this wild, rebellious energy. But really, their differences are beside the point because for you, Pluto, Sun, and Lilith are all basically conjunct. Sun and Lilith especially, but Pluto as well. So, and even if we consider the house placement too, you were born just after sunset, and that's just like it sounds like it's a very dark time. It was probably still somewhat light out when you were born. You could still, see outside without the assistance of light. Or artificial light, but the sun had set, so that has huge meaning in astrology. You were born. This Pluto Sun Lilith conjunction that we're talking about is in the 6th house, which is a very dark house, figuratively and literally. I would say, it's difficult. There's like this pain. There's this apparent death that comes when planets set, and they become obscured from our point of view. There's clearly like an ending there. What I've noticed is that, people who have major 6th house placements tend to come across very humble, very modest. They kind of keep to themselves more. That it's definitely a very introverted house. It's one way of putting it. But they're also very individualistic, very independent. They think for themselves. So I find a richness that comes from 6th house placements. I subjectively, from my own subjective point of view, I find people with 6th house placements particularly interesting because of their individual thinking. Like they have such rich opinions. They're very unique, I guess is one way of putting it. So when you add all that together, we're kind of, we've only tackled one very small part of the chart so far, but we're already kind of developing this, the probability of you being a very dark and multifaceted character. You're probably very talented. I can't see exactly what you're talented at. But again, it's hard for me to explain. So Pluto, Sun, Lilith conjunct in 6th house, Scorpio, very dark. I mean, those are difficult placements. You may have to go through like a lot of difficulty on your own, I think. But that's what has made you stronger. That's what has resulted in you developing the abilities that you have now, if that makes sense. And I know that's a little bit general, but it is general. I mean, you probably have so many different abilities in so many different areas, so many different ways. Like not only when it comes to just like how you handle life in general, but also what I was talking about earlier, the intellect, the analytical ability, the ability to process information, the ability to process emotion. Like you can kind of do it all. Let's branch outside of Scorpio though, because I've noticed a pattern that for people who have moon, or in this case sun, in Scorpio, what I've noticed is like I guess I just have this image in my mind of someone with Scorpio placements to be maybe not very conversational or chatty. But what's interesting is when you have these Scorpio placements ruled over by Gemini, So in other words, Mars is in Gemini. Mars rules over any Scorpio placements in anyone's chart. So in this case, Mars rules over Pluto, Sun, Lilith, and Venus, which we haven't talked about yet. But because there's that rulership, so or a different way of putting it is, Mars is like controlling these Scorpio placements. Like, yes, you do have this huge pattern in Scorpio, so Scorpio is a really strong sign for you, but what's controlling all of that is Gemini, because not only does Mars rule over Scorpio, and Mars is in Gemini here, but also you have Gemini rising, and the ascendant is kind of the, it's the beginning and end of the whole chart. It's, I don't know, it's kind of maybe the most important part of any chart, is one way of putting it. And Mercury rules Gemini. So what I'm getting at is, and this is actually the first thing I noticed when I pulled up your chart, is that yes, you do have this huge Scorpio theme that we kind of delved into a little bit. But you also have a lot of mercurial energy. Moon is in Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. So definitely don't think I overlooked that. We'll talk more about that. But also, again, Mars and ascendant in Gemini. And that Mars in Gemini is particularly important since you have that focus on Scorpio. So what I've noticed interacting with people whose charts are maybe a little bit similar to yours in that way, having a lot of placements in Scorpio, but then Mars and Gemini. What I've noticed is that people with that type of energy, people with those placements, can actually come across very much like a Gemini, maybe even more so than a Scorpio. So you may be actually very analytical. You still have that like deep emotional intelligence. I don't think these Virgo and Gemini placements take away from that by any means. Virgo and Gemini can have a deep emotional intelligence as well, although they do tend to be more oriented toward analytical ability. But that's what I'm saying. This chart is definitely skewed. It's a very analytical chart. It's a very intellectual chart. Because you've got Gemini, Virgo, and then it's also important to look at where Mercury is. Because you have Gemini rising, Mercury is the chart ruler. Mercury is actually at 1 degree Sagittarius. So this is where, we can kind of fill in the picture much more. Yes, you do have all that really heavy, juicy Scorpio stuff, but besides that, there's major players in Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius. All three of these signs are intellectual. They're kind of detached. They're analytical. So when we put it all together, I think combining those three signs, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, with Scorpio, paints the picture of someone very curious, very hungry for information, very intellectual, analytical. Again, like, yes, you would still have those deep feelings, the deep sensitivity, deep emotional powers, the intuition. But I would say you may actually lean a little bit more in the intellectual direction. Moon in Virgo is really interesting because, yes, that's an intellectual placement, but Moon in Virgo feels very deeply as well. So you have this, I would say, like, maybe one of your best strengths, but also one of your biggest challenges is your analytical ability. It's something that you probably can never turn off, if that makes sense. So you may be kind of an overthinker. You may have a lot of nervous energy. I do think it's nice you have Mercury in Sagittarius. So that is still intellectual, but it's very optimistic. So you may also be a little bit more kind of upbeat and optimistic than perhaps your typical Scorpio Sun person. There is that kind of darkness there, but it's complemented by an intellectual curiosity, kind of like a happy-go-lucky, detached, almost like a childlike energy, I think, is what I see in you. That's what comes with all that Mercury energy, especially with Mercury and Sagittarius. It's also interesting, since we're talking about Mercury, I guess. Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius. So, and the fact that Mercury is such a strong player in your chart, being not only the chart ruler, but also ruling over personal placements like Moon and Mars. It is interesting that Mercury's in detriment. So, and it's also in the 6th house again. So now we're back in the 6th house again, which, like I talked about, it's very individualistic, independent, modest, humble, shy, introverted. Um, but Mercury in detriment would indicate that, well, especially combining that with some of your other placements as well. It looks like you may be very misunderstood. This to me is a very introverted chart, not only because of all the sixth house placements. Um, I'm gonna jump around a little bit. I hope that's okay. But also look at where the moon is. Moon is in the fourth house. Fourth house is kind of the bottom of the chart, the base of the chart, depending on how you look at it. I'm using equal houses. Hopefully that's all right. I know other people use other house systems. But the fourth house is kind of, it's the base of the chart. It's the bottom, sort of. It's opposite the 10th house, which is the top of the sky. So having your moon in the fourth house means that your emotional energy and your core identity is locked away. It's hidden away. You probably don't feel comfortable in public spaces at all. Like, it actually may be kind of crippling for you, maybe very difficult. Because typically, someone might have a placement like moon in fourth house, which indicates, being much more comfortable at home or in familiar environments with familiar people, not being comfortable in public environments. That's not unusual for me to see in a chart. But for you, like, most charts will have some other placement in a more public area, if that makes sense. But for you, um, all the all the personal placements are in fourth house, sixth house, and then Mars is in 12th house. So these are all like very private, these all indicate someone who's withdrawn, doesn't feel comfortable with strangers or like new people, new environments. That's going to be very difficult for you. It's not impossible. I would encourage you to, try exposure therapy if you want to. Of course, you definitely don't have to. If you are truly happy and satisfied with your life, just sticking with what's comfortable and familiar to you, then by all means you can do that. I'm only here to assist you in whatever you're doing, but it may be helpful if you do want to branch out and explore something new, like with, I don't know, a career or hobby. If you wanted to do that, just know that yes, the experience will be painful and awkward and maybe even scary at first, but once you spend some significant time in a new place or with new people, that will eventually become your norm. That will become your comfort zone. You will adapt to it. You are extremely adaptable. So again, it might be awkward or scary for a while, but soon enough you'll adapt to that. And that's actually one of your biggest strengths, that once you adapt to whatever your comfort zone is, whatever's familiar to you, you're extremely like locked into that thing, that environment, that set of variables, that social setting, whatever it is. That's why you get so, in a way, kind of rigid, and it comes from a place of adaptability, because you adapt so much. You adapt your being, your essence, to what you're familiar with, and that's why it's then difficult for you to branch out into a new environment, because you've oriented yourself toward whatever that situation is. Does that make sense? So as long as you know that, you can actually use that. Yes, it's going to be difficult and it's going to be a huge investment for you to adapt to a new place, but you can do it, and it can be extremely valuable and powerful in the long run. Speaking of like in the long run, it is interesting that you have Mars in the 12th house. Any placement that's in the 12th house, 12th house is actually ruled by Saturn, not Neptune or Jupiter, believe it or not. So with anything with the 12th house, or with Saturn for that matter, like, it takes time to develop. Okay. So having your Mars there, and again, Mars is another powerful placement for you. I would say Mars and Mercury are very powerful for you, in particular. That's just offhand what I see so far. But with Mars being where it is, Mars is conjunct the ascendant, but it's Mars had just risen when you were born. It was just above the eastern horizon. It probably would have been, it might have been visible as well, because the sun had set. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, so 12th house placements are like, they come across weak or fragile early in life. They take time to develop, but they can be extremely powerful once you develop them. The reason why is because anything in the 12th house is kind of suppressed into the subconscious when we're young. So for you, it's your fighting ability. It's this warrior ability. You fight for things that are intellectual. With Mars and Gemini, You fight for ideas. You fight with ideas. You're fighting some kind of intellectual battle in this lifetime. And your abilities when it comes to fighting in this like intellectual type of way, again, that's what was suppressed when you were young. So when you were young, not only your ability to defend yourself and assert yourself, but also your intellectual ability, all of that may have been suppressed when you were young. You felt that it wasn't appropriate to express those things or to even be aware of them. So you pushed them down deep into your subconscious. They weren't visible to you. And really, that kind of goes along with the house placements of many of your other placements. So much of your personality is like very internalized, and that's where I'm saying this chart seems like very introverted to me. But as you have gotten a little bit older, you've probably become more aware. Well, you've probably become much more aware of all those things I just said were suppressed. Like you become much more aware of your fighting ability, defensive abilities, intellectual abilities to fight with information, fight for what you know to be true, and to search for truth, which I think is I think that's really big for you. Searching for truth. Maybe that's why you're here. Maybe that's why you're into astrology. Searching for truth and information, even if it's not accepted or known about, even if everyone else thinks that you're crazy or stupid, you don't care. You want to know what's right. You want to find the information. You want to find what's true. All your personal placements are aligned with that, in my opinion. Moon in Virgo, Mercury in Sagittarius, the Scorpio placements, the Gemini placements, all of those are hungry for information and truth. They want the raw truth. They don't want they don't want to dress things up, and this isn't like Libra or Pisces or Leo that we're talking about, which are much more about image and wanting things to be nice and pleasant, and let's go for things that are it's more about aesthetics. That's not what you're about. You're very raw. You're more about, okay, what's going on the inside. Like, I don't care what the decorations are. I want to see how this machine truly works. Like, what's underneath the surface. That's your kind of mentality with anything and everything, I would say. And maybe that's why you tend to shy away from like conversations, because I think this may make you very misunderstood. Others may perceive you as being like very cold, when you're not cold. It's just that you probably don't care for like social etiquette. Like, you may see it all as being very fake, and you may not really see the need for it. Because for you, it's like, let's just get to the point. Let's get to the truth. Like, you may actually be very direct, and I think that directness may kind of scare people, or other people may not understand it. But I mean, you're not wrong. I would say though that there is a reason for like things like small talk. Like, sometimes we need to warm up a little bit before we get into the deep stuff. Like, that's something that I've had to learn. Okay, but anyway, I'm kind of just rambling. I think I covered most of the basics. I haven't touched on your Scorpio, or your South Node in Leo yet. And you actually have multiple placements in Leo that we'll talk about. Okay, but yeah, before I move on, I would just say a lot of intelligence in this chart. That sounds really cool and fun, but that's going to be very difficult for you as well. Just all that, definitely emotional intelligence, but maybe even more so the analytical and the, like, you may be very book smart, but you can probably learn anything that you're curious about, and that's something that I can never see with charts. I can't see what interests you. But part of you, I think it's common with Scorpio placements that knowledge is power, and that there's like this underlying restlessness, or like, I almost want to say insecurity with Scorpio. Not to say that it's not in a bad way. I think this is actually what makes Scorpios very strong, because they're constantly moving, they're constantly changing, adapting, learning. There's this ambition there. They're never done. Like, part of you is constantly quantifying everything and measuring everything and finding, greater efficiency and optimizing everything. And it may be exhausting. It's like you're never done. But there's this curiosity, there's this hunger that's kind of constantly pushing you. All right, so in this chapter, we're going to talk about your karma. We're going to get deep with a little bit about your past lives, and then we'll get deep with, how is that past life experience significant in this life? We'll talk about your challenges, your potential, and we'll talk about your upbringing a little bit too. Okay, so with South Node in first house, South Node in second house Leo at 1 degree Leo. This looks like in a past life you were very independent, like you took care of yourself. Second house Leo, that's kind of what that's all about. Very independent, very individualistic. So I kind of chuckle at that because to me that sounds kind of like how you are in this life as well, because that kind of correlates to your other placements, if that makes sense. Very independent, but you weren't just independent in the past life. You were very engaged. Like you were very outgoing and warm and generous. Not to say that you're not that way in this life. I'm just saying, South Node in second house Leo, you took on the role of Leo basically. So you were someone, you were a leader. You were someone very proud and warm and generous. And maybe you got a lot of attention for that. You were someone very confident, very, I say that not just because of Leo, but also because this is second house Leo we're talking about. Very independent, very proud, confident, I know it's right. What else? You were independent, but you may have been, like I said, like some kind of leader. I wouldn't go as far as to say that you were like in charge of a whole town or country or something like that. I think you were more like maybe the leader of maybe like a large family, or the leader of maybe like your tribe or something. You were someone that was probably very well liked. Like you had a great reputation. You were charismatic because your charisma came from your confidence and like you were so sure that of who you were. It was just so simple for you that I am what I am. Like I know what's right. I know what's not right. I know what I need. You're probably great at giving advice. Like, so I see a very, very strong personality, strong character. The South Node has these kind of loose conjunctions that are interesting. South Node is 12 degrees away from Jupiter, so that is a bit of a stretch, but it's in the same sign. It's in the same general area. And then South Node is closer to Chiron, but it's an out of sign conjunction about 4 degrees away with Chiron at 27 degrees Cancer. So that strengthens this theme of you were involved maybe in a family. Maybe you were some kind of caretaker, some kind of parent, or maybe grandparent, some kind of guardian figure. I could definitely see that with with South Node in second house Leo conjunct Chiron from Cancer. That to me paints the picture of, like I said, definitely a guardian or parent of some sort, someone who took care of, not only raising others, guiding them, but defending them as well. Like you were extremely loyal. You were a protector, guardian. You're a strong personality. You were probably ruthless. Like if you saw that there was a threat or someone being disrespectful of someone you loved, you would be a force to be reckoned with. And I'm getting chills now. I can really feel, I think that that's true. But also from the other hand, South Node loosely conjunct Jupiter. You were such a gregarious spirit, like very joyous, very optimistic. Like this is very fiery energy, like very, very passionate, emotional. That passion and emotion is what you use not only to be protective and defensive and kind of a warrior, but also a guardian as well, and a parent, grandparent, etc. I don't know exactly what it is. So in many ways, I think that does sound familiar to what you are in this life. I think the main difference is this huge focus on intellect. Like that, to me, appears to be actually new. yes, that is very deep in your chart and deep in your life themes for this life, but that appears to be new to me. I don't see. Well, I mean, with the South Node conjunction to Jupiter, it does look like you were very knowledgeable in a past life for sure. Like this wise, knowledgeable. I'm picturing, you know what I'm picturing? King of Wands, the tarot card, King of Wands, like someone who is. I'm picturing it as a more masculine figure. I guess it could be feminine, but I'm picturing a more masculine figure that was like, so deeply confident and someone who's a guardian and a protector, a warrior, but also someone who's wise. So I guess, yeah, there was like this wisdom, like this worldly wisdom that came with that. But coming into this life, clearly you've chosen a much more curious and intellectual role. You still have, this focus on Scorpio and Mars and even Mercury and Sagittarius. These are very passionate placements. And I think, we can see commonalities between past lives and current lives. It's a lot of passion. You're still a fighter in this life. You've still got not only the strong Scorpio influence, which is, Scorpio is a fighting sign. It's a warrior sign. But also Mars conjunct the ascendant. It's very clear that you are a fighter in this lifetime. It's just that, again, I think you're fighting for something informational or an idea, a movement, like information, something intellectual. You're fighting against information. You're fighting for information with it. And also, I forget where I was going with that, but when we look at the nodes, going back to the nodes, you also have North Node at 1 degree Aquarius. So that's really indicating you're moving much more in this like detached kind of intellectual direction, if that makes sense. And we can look at your childhood really briefly. Having South Node and the IC both in Leo, to me, suggests when you were a child, you may have gotten a lot of attention. Like, I don't know what that attention was for exactly. Could have been from your parents or family. It could have been for your, I don't know, like you look like a really smart person. Maybe it's because you were advanced in school. I don't know what it is, but one way or another, I see a lot of attention that you got as a kid, and that can be very like glorifying, but it can also be kind of exposing. But you learned what's interesting, like I said, the rest of your chart looks very introverted and shy. Maybe you didn't like that attention. I think in a weird way, it can actually be very isolating, getting so much attention and having everyone know you. Yeah, that's great, but I think that can sometimes take away from like deeper connections. I don't know. So I don't know if that's what happened for your childhood, but at any rate, I guess the point I was trying to make, I see you as a kid being kind of like Leo. Both the main placements that I look at that indicate what you were like as a kid, both of them are in Leo. So that suggests the past. How do I put this? Like, a lot of the time we can see our past life energy like in what we were like as children. So I'm seeing similar themes, whether we're talking about what you were like in the past life or what you were like as a child. Both are like Leo. Both are proud, outgoing, fiery, maybe spontaneous, sporadic, impulsive, very charismatic, very warm and generous, but also a little bit self-centered at the same time. This indicates you may have been kind of a rebellious child, actually, and so fiery and confident. But I think the same signs that are confident also are kind of simplistic. I think that simplicity is what allows them to be confident. So you may have had a more simplistic kind of mentality when you were younger, and that allowed you to be so confident and so warm and outgoing. But as you got a little bit older, I think that's where you took on a much more intellectual type of role, if that makes sense. And all of this is just speculation, by the way. I'm just guessing based on patterns I've seen with your placements. But that's the way that I can make sense of your placements. But this would just continue even more so. That is the point that I was eventually trying to get to. North Node is in Aquarius. That's suggesting doing something on your own. You want to help the world. You want to help the world, but not by directly like helping people. Not by being a nurse or like volunteering at a soup kitchen. You want to help the world through an idea, through information, or through like an invention or a book, or through science, through information, through you may actually need to spend a lot of time alone to work on the thing that will change the world or help the world. Does that make sense? That's kind of the role of Aquarius. And with North Node in Aquarius, that's showing that that's the direction you're moving toward. I feel like this is kind of a natural progression in a way, because you have so many very intellectual placements. And so it's not surprising to learn that you're moving in a direction toward Aquarius, which is also very intellectual. North Node is an 8th house Aquarius as well. So this is like very private, very North Node in 8th house. So it may not just be purely informational. Like, yes, whatever this is, the direction you're moving to may be very detached and intellectual, but it's also working with something much greater. Maybe it does have to do with emotion or spirituality, maybe metaphysics. Could be about a lot of things, if I'm being totally honest. But let's see. I got kind of off track. North Node in Aquarius. Ultimately, it's about balancing the nodes. South Node in Leo, North Node in Aquarius. Both of these signs are very powerful. They're both fixed signs. They're both fixed yang signs. They're both leadership signs. The difference is Leo is a leader in a much more engaged, like physically present kind of way. Aquarius more leads by example. Like they just do their own thing. So you're moving in, like I already said, you were very individualistic and independent by looking at your other placements, but the nodal axis is suggesting that as well, and you may actually become even more independent as you get older. Saturn is close to the North Node in Capricorn. Saturn's direct. It's kind of weird. So Saturn is direct, which would indicate a present father in your upbringing. But it's in the 8th house, which doesn't form a strong aspect to the first house / the ascendant. Same with the sun, for that matter. Sun is in the 6th house. When you have placements in the 6th house, especially the sun in this case, that suggests that your parents may never truly know you or feel connected to you, if that makes sense. Like maybe they expected something different from you. Maybe they don't understand you. Maybe they love you. I don't know. I know this is sensitive stuff. I don't mean to be disrespectful with my speculations, but yeah, it's like your father was present. It's just that he may not understand you. Both your parents, maybe even your family, may not entirely understand you, and that's okay. That's what happens when you have a lot of placements around the descendant, which you very much do. Your moon is also in the 4th house. Moon is said to represent the mother, and again, 4th house, it's the place farthest away from the top of the sky. So when you have placements in the 10th house, not that you do at all, but that would be the top of the sky. That would mean that those placements are very present. For you, it's the opposite. Moon was shining on the other side of the world. So that some astrologers would interpret that as saying the mother was absent. The mother, and again, I know that's very sensitive, but that could have happened, in a whole variety of circumstances. Maybe she was totally gone. Maybe she was just gone for a certain time period. Maybe she was, mentally absent. We all struggle. We all, there could have been, I don't know. I don't want to speculate much more than that, but your chart, to me, the best I can see it, shows an absent mother, a present father, but neither of them entirely understand you. So maybe that's also part of what makes you so independent. Like, You think for yourself. You don't expect someone to come along and make sense of everything for you or figure everything out for you. You probably wouldn't even want that. You're used to kind of just doing things on your own. Like, if I have a problem, I'm going to fix it myself. Like, if that's just the simplest way for you, that's all that you know. And that's very admirable. I think that's part of what makes you so adaptable. Um, well, what's interesting is with Saturn in Capricorn, you have a very strong Saturn. Saturn's in his or her. I think Saturn's kind of gender neutral. If I'm being honest, it is yin energy, but it's not really masculine or feminine. I don't know. Astrologers can fight me on that. Anyway, but with Saturn in Capricorn and being direct like this, to me that would indicate that you were brought up. There was structure in your upbringing, maybe more than you would have liked. Like there was this rigidness. There was definitely that stability. You know, it's nice to have some structure, but yeah, maybe it was a lot. So at a young age, you would probably rebel from that. Like you didn't want any structure. Structure in general may have been very difficult for you to deal with. And that's not unusual for a Scorpio either. Having the Scorpio placements and having these very curious intellectual placements that you have, you may have been, well, and also looking at your Leo IC and South Node, you may have had a hard time like fitting in with like the program, fitting in with the normal, you know, you were always going against the grain or against the current. What's interesting though is with Saturn and Capricorn, you have the potential of creating a greater structure, and North Node and Aquarius supports this as well. You're going to take on a very Saturnian role because both Saturn and North Node represent kind of what you're working toward, like who you're becoming in this life. Even Midheaven does as well, now that I think about it. Midheaven, North Node, and Saturn, they're all showing, you know, where are you going? What are you becoming? What's your goal in this life? And they're all in Capricorn and Aquarius, which are all ruled by Saturn. So anyway, the one, you know, yes, you may have been rebellious against structure early in life, but maybe that's because deep down you know that the structure can be better. You can create a better structure, maybe new traditions, new rules and regulations. You know, you're meant to be a leader in this type of way. This is something that's going to emerge much more so later in life. You know, you've already gone through your first Saturn return, so that's where you may have experienced a dose of this, of being your own leader, creating your own structure. You may have felt like, you know, wow, I hated structure and rules and rigidity when I was young, but now I'm the one implementing this. That's because, you know, you're in a position with all of your intellect and your other abilities, you can create a structure that's more functional, maybe more true, a structure or rules or regulations that are based on a much more complex understanding of the world, if that makes sense. Because look at your other placements, all this Mercury, all the mutable signs and the Scorpio, you understand how complex the world is. Like you see all the nuance, you're open to that level of detail. So I think that's what would allow you to become such a functional leader. And, you know, if you do create like rules, regulations, structure, traditions, they're going to be impeccable because they're going to account for every little detail. They're going to account for all the information. So that's how I can see kind of your character arc, so to speak, of starting out as a rebel, but actually later in life becoming the opposite of a rebel, someone who, well, I guess in a way, maybe it's not the opposite. Maybe you're still kind of a rebel, but you're like instituting your own structure rather than just pulling away from the structure, if that makes sense. Okay. That was a little messy, but I think I covered everything I wanted to cover in that chapter. Let's talk about your career a little bit. Yeah, this should be interesting because I haven't really talked about that yet. We did just talk about, you know, Midheaven, North Node, Saturn. I kind of just clustered those together. They're kind of neatly packaged because I really do believe those three placements, they're all very karmic and they have to do with kind of the direction that we're moving in. So the fact that they're all very close to each other in your chart is just convenient for me. But again, yeah, so they all, again, going back to that whole theme of you're meant to be a leader. You're meant to be someone like, The same thing that I talked about earlier, where yes, you can be a little bit awkward because I would speculate you can be very direct, maybe you come across a little bit cold. Yes, that can make for like awkward social interactions, but those same traits can actually make you a very effective leader because, especially when it comes to like in public, or in your workplace, you come across very serious, you come across authoritative. So even though that may be very uncomfortable for you, you may not feel that way. Um, with this is gonna take time. I think like you're not gonna. I mean, how do I put this? Like your chart to me doesn't look like someone who's just super like overflowing with warmth and emotion in a public setting. Like, yes, you did get a lot of attention when you were young, so you know how to handle that. But like your comfort zone is not necessarily like the public arena. You're more comfortable being behind the scenes. I don't think you need or want attention really. I think you're fine just kind of doing your own thing. Moon and Virgo really skews the chart this way as well. And then plus the house, the fourth and sixth house placements of so many placements that you have. Yeah, you're definitely, I don't see you as being an attention seeker. So this may take time, but eventually I do see you as being a leader and being a good one, being very authoritative. Others would respect your leadership for the most part. It may take you a lot of challenges and trials and tribulations to get to this vision that I'm seeing. And you'll be tested, you'll be challenged more than others in public spaces, and in if you're a leader as well, you'll be challenged there too. But at the same time, I see you being respected because you come across knowledgeable, you come across experienced, especially as a leader or in public, if that makes sense. So anyway, so some kind of career maybe involving that. Midheaven has the most to do with career and reputation, and for you, Midheaven is in Aquarius. So that means that you can deal with people of all walks of life. Like you treat everyone the same. It's very egalitarian, I think is the word. Very holistic. And again, I think with North Node and Midheaven in Aquarius, you want to help people. Like you may not really be great with like one-on-one interactions. Like I wouldn't put you in like hospitality necessarily. That's not what your chart suggests to me. But you want to help people. You want to make a difference. And again, I think maybe that will be something involving knowledge or information. I could see you being a really great like teacher, professor, or I don't know. I see you as being some kind of like scientist in a way. Scientist, author. You could be a good writer with all your Mercury placements. Maybe you may actually be. That's the weird thing. Like, even though you may be very withdrawn, you may actually be a very excellent communicator. So, something with that. I mean, you could go in a lot of directions. You being so adaptable, there's a wide range of things that you could do and be successful at. But I think you need to do something with all this analytical ability. Also, yes, it is going to be difficult being the underdog and being a rebel. I'm just looking. You don't have a lot of detriment placements though, just Mercury, because detriment placements are rebellious. Oh, and Venus. Okay, so that's two personal placements. And then Scorpio placements in general, for you, other than Venus, they're not in detriment, but I feel like Scorpio just has like a detriment kind of vibe. I don't know how well versed in astrology you are. Hopefully I'm making sense. Anyway, I was just saying it's going to be difficult for your career, especially early in life, being a rebel, like being against the structure. Like the structure doesn't make sense to you. So anything like really bureaucratic and like with a lot of rules, like working for a really, mega large company, I don't think that's going to work for you. It's going to be, well, it would be soul sucking for anyone, but especially for you, because that's not what you're about. You're about the truth. You're about figuring things out. You might be too smart for your own good in situations like that. So So finding a career for you might be tough, which is weird because it's not that you're not talented. Like you look very intelligent, very capable, very adaptable. It's almost like you could do anything. Yet at the same time, yeah, it may be very difficult for you to find where you fit in, where you belong. Um, So I would say either doing something on your own or working with other rebels, maybe other outcasts, other truth seekers. Not everyone wants the truth, not nearly as much as you do. I would say that for sure. Most people are happy with a basic understanding of how the world works, but you really want to figure things out. You want to know the truth. So I don't know how that fits into your career, but it does. I would say whatever you are curious about, that's what you should do with your life. And again, I can't see that. I can't see what interests you. I can't see if you're interested in like biology or history or economics. I have no idea. I can't see if you're maybe you're actually very like physically oriented as well. I could definitely see you're very intellectual. But whatever you're interested in, you have the ability to become a master of that. Like there's probably subjects that you know everything about, and I have no idea what those subjects are. But I would say that's what you should use. Um, because whatever that is, you would be the master of that. You would be the expert psychologist, the expert scientist. That's what I see as being an expert in your field. I just can't see what field that is. And that would make sense how that would check all the boxes in my opinion of how you that would be very independent and individualistic, but you could still gain a lot of respect and even have a strong reputation that way as well through being like the top archaeologist or whatever it is. I don't know, marine biologist. I have no idea. And if you haven't gone this direction of academia and maybe I don't know if you've gone to college or not, university. If you're not on that kind of path, I think it may be more difficult for you. In that case, maybe finding some kind of system or some kind of business that actually interests you, and then that business could be the thing that you figure everything about, and every little detail about it, and you're like you're the closest thing to perfect when it comes to understanding this particular business, if that makes sense. And then so I could see you being like a business owner as well, because even if you start out in a low rank, you would be very ambitious and constantly learning about that's the difference though, is like whatever this is has to be interesting to you, and then that's where your strengths are really going to shine, because you're going to learn everything there is to learn about whatever it is. So that's what I would say, either like professional expert of some kind or maybe a business owner, some kind of business that interests you. Okay, let's leave it at that. Last for this, I was almost going to say this is my favorite part of the reading. Maybe it is. I have fun in this last chapter. This is the romantic part of the reading. We talk about your compatibility, your attraction. What kind of person are you attracted to? What kind of traits would I see? How do I see the ideal relationship playing out for you? And of course, like what zodiac signs would you be compatible with as well? So for all of this, I really look at Venus, Mars, and the descendant. I say that, I've said that so many times. Venus is in Scorpio for you, Mars is in Gemini, and descendant is in Sagittarius. So we've got kind of a mix here. We've got some water, some air, some fire. Mars and Venus both work in a similar way. They're both kind of like counterparts to each other. They're like the yin and the yang when it comes to attraction and compatibility. And they both work both ways. So Venus and Mars placements, not only do they show what kind of person you're attracted to, they also show how you express yourself romantically and sexually. Let's start with Mars. Let's start with Mars. One thing I've noticed before we even get into this, besides Venus, Mars, and the descendant, I have noticed many couples have the same ascendant sign, like many of the couples that I've done synastry readings for. If you're interested in a compatibility reading, you can definitely hit me up for that. anyone out there. But anyway, so yes, you do have Gemini rising. Another Gemini rising could be interesting for you. I think the reason why is because when you have the same ascendant as someone else, you have the same approach to things. You have the same approach, like, to life, to situations, etc. So it puts you on the same page. So even if the rest of your charts are very different, you at least have that in common. You have that kind of connection, and you also have the same kind of vibe. Your ascendant is your vibe. So Gemini rising could be interesting, but the reason why I'm saying all that now is because you have Mars in Gemini conjunct the rising, and Mars indicates sexual attraction. Mars is a double-edged sword, though. It does indicate attraction, but it can also indicate, like, irritability or restlessness. So, you know, your Mars sign, I would definitely say is noteworthy when it comes to compatibility. So okay, so with Mars and Gemini, that means you're attracted to someone intelligent and multifaceted, for sure. I think that's actually a common theme between your Mars, Venus, and descendant. Because Gemini, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, those are the signs that I view you as being the most attracted to. And yes, they are very different signs, but I think one commonality is that they're all very multifaceted. These are all kind of complicated signs. So you're looking for someone deep and intelligent, someone who has different sides to their personality. And I think this is a little bit unique. Like, many people want someone that they can understand right away because that's what makes them feel comfortable and safe. But for you, you're open to a much deeper situation. Like, you want this complexity and this you're attracted to someone with depth to them. Like, you want that intelligence, you want that emotional depth. But anyway, so Mars in Gemini, they need to be intelligent. They need to be, and that's no surprise since you're so intelligent and truth seeking. You need someone else who's that way as well. And honestly, I usually start with Mars because it's, in my opinion, it's the least important of the three placements. It's more sexual in nature. It doesn't have as much to do with, like, romantic compatibility. And of course, the sexual compatibility is important as well, and attraction. I might come back to that, but I'm going to move on to Venus. So, okay, Venus is interesting. Venus is in detriment. I really have kind of neglected Venus in this reading. I haven't talked about her a whole lot. You have Venus in detriment in Scorpio. This is a very difficult Venus placement to have. I think the reason why, I don't have this placement, but looking at it from the outside, I think, Scorpio is the most emotionally intense sign. And Venus shows not only what kind of person you're attracted to, but also how you express yourself romantically, how you go about attraction and romance. So putting Venus in the most emotionally intense sign, this means that when you have feelings for someone, you obsess over them. Like, you might be a little bit possessive. Like, you're very loyal and very obsessive. Like, there's no gray area for you. Like, like, how you feel about probably people in general, but especially romantically. Like, if there's an attraction or not, because it's very strong if it's there. It's black or white. It's extreme. This is Scorpio. So people are not going to understand this. That's part of the difficulty. Not everyone feels attraction on a level like you do. That may scare people. Like, this is intense. Another thing too is that when you feel so strongly for someone, yeah, that can be fun. It can be exhilarating. It can be exciting. But it also puts your fundamental well-being in the hands of a completely different person, which it puts you in a very vulnerable place. And so I think that's why Venus and Scorpio gets a bad rap. People will say this is a manipulative placement. It can be, because it just depends on how you deal with that level of vulnerability, feeling so strongly for someone else. It may be tempting to try to control them, or you may want to just run away from it because it's easier just to not even have it. There's a lot of very dysfunctional ways of dealing with this, because it's just it's a challenge. It's a difficult task. What I would advise though is that Venus is in Scorpio. That means you're attracted to someone like Scorpio. Someone who has some kind of scorpionic tendencies or traits will have this in common with you. They'll be receptive to this kind of attraction. Like they'll be intense too, so they'll understand you on that level. You may be attracted to people with Scorpio placements. You may relate to them a lot. I do think the main difference though is that you're going to be a little bit more detached than like an average person with Scorpio placements. Um, I still think that you are very sensitive and very emotional, but you've got like such a brain on you. You've got, such a high level of analytical ability. I don't think Scorpio is a very analytical sign. But you analyze things just for the sake of analyzing them, like things that may not even be very significant. You're still interested. You have the curiosity and the intellectual capacity to analyze everything. I don't think Scorpio goes that far. I think they're more preoccupied on emotional matters, in general, anyway. So that could be one major difference that you have with other, your fellow Scorpions. But yes, Scorpio. So far, we've got, definitely Gemini, Scorpio, and we'll get to Sagittarius. These are all signs of attraction for you. With Venus and Scorpio, it's interesting because on the one hand, you need someone loyal. Like, you need someone who's a little bit reliable and consistent, because if they're not, if you feel so strongly for someone and they're completely just wild and reckless and you have no idea where they're going to be at, you have no idea if they're ever going to come back, that I think that would be extremely distressing for you. Like, you can't feel that strongly for someone. It's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to feel secure that way. So someone who has a little bit of heavy energy like Scorpio, or maybe a different water or earth sign, that may be attractive for you, because that reliability and consistency will make you feel safe and secure. However, they also need to be complex though. So let's talk about the earth and water signs. So for example, looking at the earth signs, I'm going to go on a tangent here, but Virgo may be very attractive because Virgo does feel very deeply, but it's also analytical. So you have a lot in common in that way. You have Moon in Virgo, so you're likely to have deep connections with people with Virgo placements, or even people who resonate with Virgo traits but have other placements. People that are modest, usually Virgo's kind of introverted, very analytical, organized, practical, good work ethic. Like, this may be attractive for you. I could see how you'd have a lot in common with them. Virgo's very complex as well. They have that complex intelligence, and I think that would be very attractive for you. But Virgo's also reliable and consistent, so that's the point I was trying to make. They have this happy medium that I'm trying to talk about. You need someone who is reliable and consistent, but also deep and complex. So that's what makes me think Virgo. Compare that to Taurus or Capricorn, which, yes, they are reliable, consistent. That would make you feel safe, but I don't think they're like complex enough to be interesting for you. And of course, we with any compatibility, we have to take into account the entire chart. Someone could have Sun in Taurus or Capricorn and still be very complex, if they have other placements. But I'm just saying in general, Taurus and Capricorn are not particularly complicated. Capricorn can be secretive and private, but they're still relatively simple. With them, Taurus and Capricorn, what you see is what you get. That's the beauty of them. It's like sacred simplicity. I don't think that's necessarily what you're looking for. I think you need a happy medium of someone complex but reliable. So again, that makes me think Virgo, honestly. Because Virgo is it's a happy medium. Virgo's similar to Scorpio, but it's also similar to Gemini. So yeah, so part of me thinks earth signs, but Virgo is different among the earth signs because it's intellectual. Taurus and Capricorn, yes, they are practical, but that practicality comes from a place of emotion and intuition. So I don't see them for you. I don't really see them. But Virgo could be very interesting. let's go back to your Venus placement. Venus in Scorpio. Scorpio could definitely be an interesting sign for sure. Virgo or Scorpio. Um, but again, I think if they have major placements in Scorpio, they're also going to need some detached placements like what you have. Otherwise, they're going to be too emotional for you, maybe. Um, I mean, you do want that emotional intensity and emotional depth. Anyway, let's look at the other water signs though. So Pisces could be interesting. You do have a lot of mutable placements, so you'll understand Pisces to some extent. But the difference though is that these other mutable signs that you have stronger in your chart, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, these are all intellectual in nature. Pisces is different from any of the other mutable signs because it's really not intellectual. It can be, Pisces can be a little detached, but it's very emotional, very sensitive. So that just seems awkward to me. And same with Cancer for that matter. I mean, yes, they do have some of what you're looking for. They have that emotional depth and complexity. Pisces in particular is very like emotionally complex, I would say. But you're looking for an intellectual complexity as well, which may or may not be there with those signs. So far I'm really looking at Virgo and Scorpio. I think they have that happy medium. Well, especially Virgo. I really like Virgo for you. But maybe something to do with Scorpio or Gemini. Let's look at your descendant though. So if you have Gemini rising, that means you have Sagittarius descendant. So that means what you bring to the table is you're detached, you're adaptable, and you're very, you see all angles, you see all aspects to things. This makes you very in a weird way, this makes you actually very agreeable. Like you can be very, I can see you being very rebellious. I could also see you being very agreeable because you can see all aspects to things. You can see every side to the story. So this same dynamic makes you, this may mean that you're like, because you're so adaptable and you kind of go with the flow, I think you would prefer the other person to initiate like romantically, if that makes sense. I mean, this is true for any air rising, in my opinion. With Gemini rising, you're attracted to the opposite. So your descendant, that's opposite the ascendant. The descendant has to do with what kind of person you attract. It has to do with what kind of person you're compatible with as well. So with descendant and Sagittarius, that shows you're attracted toward people that are maybe a little bit more outgoing or decisive than you are. People who are a little fiery, people who are very warm, adventurous. That's attractive to you. Someone who is intellectual, but they're also deeply emotional too. Sagittarius kind of has that. Sagittarius is the centaur because they're half, beast, half human. They're intellectual like a human, and they're animalistic like a animal. Like they've got the instincts and the mentality, if that makes sense. So that's what you're attracted to. Someone who is kind of both deeply intellectual and intelligent, but also deeply passionate and emotional. So that could be someone with major Sagittarius placements. The other fire signs, again, they have some of what you're looking for, but not all of it. Sagittarius is intellectual. The other fire signs really aren't. Leo and Aries, yes, they're going to be decisive and bold and outgoing, probably more so than Sagittarius. But then what they lack is the analytical ability. Of course, that's a generalization. But so I mean, putting it all together, you have a really interesting kind of compatibility. You want someone who's a happy medium, someone intellectually intelligent, but also emotionally deep and intelligent. And you want someone complex, but also reliable. So the signs now, okay, so after putting all that together, I know this has been a little bit rambly, but putting all that together, I'm really looking at Virgo, Scorpio, and Sagittarius for you. I think all of those signs have kind of a mix of being intellectual but also emotional, to varying degrees, of course. And I think they have kind of a mix that would be interesting for you. And you really are kind of a mix of different elements. I see you as being Gemini, Virgo, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. You are a combination of mostly those 4 signs. So you've got one sign of each element. So maybe someone else who has different elements too. We talked about fire signs. We talked about earth and water signs. So that just leaves air signs. Again, yeah, Gemini could be interesting for you. You'll relate to Gemini. Gemini's very curious, very intellectual. Gemini knows a lot about many different topics. Gemini is multifaceted. All of that could be very interesting for you. You could have really deep conversations. You could learn from each other. Gemini could kind of keep you guessing, which I think might be very interesting and attractive for you. And Gemini can be very deep as well. They are very detached, but air signs have kind of a weird way of relating to emotions, but that may not be the worst thing for you. So Gemini could be interesting. Other than that, though, I don't see, other than Mars and the ascendant, you don't have a whole lot going on in the air signs. You do have North Node and Midheaven in Aquarius, but those I don't think have as much to do with compatibility. I usually kind of caution against dating the sign of your North Node because, okay, yes, the North Node helps you to evolve. So being with someone with major Aquarius placements, they'll help you to grow and evolve. That sounds awesome. That's great. But nodal energy is kind of unstable. It's constantly changing. So in other words, like if you're with someone who has a lot of Aquarius placements, you're going to be constantly pushed to grow and you'll be constantly challenged. And, you'll grow and evolve a lot, but it's going to be, I think it's kind of draining. Do you want that constant challenge in a romantic relationship? I think that can be kind of tenuous. What does tenuous even mean? That's the word that came to me. And Libra, I don't know. There's nothing going on in Libra. Other than Gemini, I don't see you being really that into the air signs. Air signs are intellectual. They are interesting. But again, you want a mix of intellect with emotional depth and intelligence. And air signs, like, yes, they do have deep emotions, but they're kind of like MIA. They don't know how to relate to them. They don't know how to express them. So I don't know. I'm just not in love with the air signs other than maybe Gemini. Plus you have so many mutable placements in general in your chart. You'll understand fellow mutable signs like Gemini, but Aquarius and Libra, I don't see it as much. I just don't. So anyway, so all of that is to say, usually I break it down elementally, but for you, it's not really that simple. You have a mix of elemental placements. Even your compatibility placements are all in different elements. So it's not a particular element that you're looking for. I think, as usual, what you're looking for is more complex than that. You're looking for, again, I said it earlier, it's someone who is very intelligent emotionally and mentally, and someone complex but reliable. So I'm looking at Virgo. It's really the same signs that you have strong in your chart, I guess. Definitely Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, but also maybe Gemini. Okay, so that's what I see for you. I hope you enjoyed this reading, and anyone else who is watching this, again, please support the channel by considering getting a reading of your own. They're only $55 right now, which I think is a steal. So thanks for requesting this reading. Thanks anyone else for watching, and have a great day.